If put to the test, most people with at least a passing interest in old money dynasties in American history can name maybe 2 or 3 living Vanderbilt family members. The CNN anchor everyone recognizes, the tragic brother who died young, and perhaps the operators of the massive Biltmore estate in North Carolina that tourists visit by the thousands. What almost nobody realizes is that there were secret Vanderbilt heirs living today who don't carry the famous surname, who carved out ordinary middle-class lives far removed from Manhattan's society pages. Indeed, their existence reveals something profound about how American aristocracy actually works in the 21st century, and often surnames matter more than bloodlines in preserving dynasty identity. Yes, you remove the last name and you effectively vanish from the historical record, even when your mother's maiden name once meant American royalty. Therefore, in today's episode of Old Money Empires, we reveal the forgotten Vanderbilts who escaped the family curse by accident of naming, built lives of remarkable normalcy despite their heritage, and prove that sometimes the only way to survive a famous family is to ensure nobody knows you're part of it. If we were to ask you about the Vanderbilt family today and individual members, you might come up with 3 names, maybe even 4, but it's a far cry from when that surname was synonymous with American royalty. First would be Anderson Cooper, of course, that iconic silver-haired CNN anchor with a reputation for calm, measured reporting. Indeed, the man who spent most of his career avoiding any mention of his famous lineage preferred to let people think his last name might as well have been Smith. Only after becoming a father and losing his mother in 2019 did he embrace the family history, co-authoring a best-selling book about the dynasty with historian Catherine Howe. He carries his father Wyatt Cooper's last name, not Vanderbilt, which helped him dodge the association for years. Then there's the Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina. George Washington Vanderbilt II's 250-room cottage remains the largest privately owned home in the United States. The estate somehow survived when almost every other Vanderbilt mansion got demolished or turned into museums. The Cecil family runs it now, George's descendants through his daughter Cornelia, who married into British nobility. They've turned it into a tourism empire, hosting over 1 million visitors annually and generating roughly $207 million in revenue as of 2016. Wine tastings, seasonal festivals, hotels, restaurants, all while preserving the mansion's original grandeur. The more tragic-minded might recall Carter Cooper, Anderson's older brother, who jumped from the family's 14th floor Manhattan penthouse in 1988. Gloria Vanderbilt watched helplessly as her 23-year-old son fell to his end. Princeton-educated, handsome, and seemingly blessed with everything, Carter's passing at such a young age shocked everyone who knew him. The tragedy became a defining moment for both Gloria and Anderson, who was just 21 at the time. Gloria wrote about it in her 1997 book, A Mother's Story. The event later became central to the 2016 HBO documentary Nothing Left Unsaid, Gloria Vanderbilt and Anderson Cooper, where mother and son discussed their shared grief. Some might even mention Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. Cornelius Commodore Vanderbilt funded it with $1 million endowment in 1873, though he never even visited the campus. He simply wanted to make a gesture toward post-Civil War reconciliation. Bishop Holland McTire convinced him that a Southern university would serve that purpose nicely. The students there today probably know more about their football team than the railroad tycoon whose name graces their diplomas. The family maintains no operational connection to the institution. What nobody mentions, however, are Gloria's other son. America knows all about Anderson and remembers the tragedy of Carter. Most folks simply do not know about the 2 Vanderbilt heirs still living who have a backstory as compelling as any Gilded Age scandal. To understand why two Vanderbilt heirs carry the name Stokowski instead of their mother's famous name, it requires examining the forces that shaped Gloria Vanderbilt's desperate need for independence. Without grasping how profoundly the custody trial damaged her, you can't comprehend why she would marry a suspected mobster at 17, then a conductor 42 years her senior at 21, or why one of those sons would vanish from the family for 38 years. The story of Stan and Chris Stokowski begins not with their births in the 1950s, but with their mother's traumatic childhood in the 1930s. Those who follow Vanderbilt family lore, Gloria became the poor little rich girl during a sensational custody trial. What they rarely consider is how that experience created a woman who would marry 4 times, always to men who represented escape from the world that had brutalized her as a child. Her second husband, Leopold Stokowski, would father the 2 forgotten Vanderbilt sons. Gloria Laura Vanderbilt entered the world on February 20th, 1924, already marked by tragedy. Her father, Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt, had been the ultimate wasted son of privilege. On his 21st birthday alone, he reportedly lost $70,000 gambling, over $2.6 million in today's dollars. A dedicated horse breeder and gambler, he burned through his inheritance with breathtaking speed, maintaining stables, yachts, and a lifestyle his dwindling fortune couldn't support. When Gloria was just 18 months old, he died of cirrhosis at age 45, leaving his young widow virtually penniless. The 2 daughters from his marriages inherited a $5 million trust fund that had been locked away by Reginald's prudent father. This represented approximately $100 million in today's money, but it came with strings attached. Gloria's mother, also named Gloria, was only 21 when widowed. Born Gloria Morgan, she spent the 1920s living extravagantly across Europe. Paris, London. She traveled with her identical twin sister, Thelma, who was then the mistress of the Prince of Wales. Young Gloria stayed behind with her nanny Emma Sullivan Caselick, whom she called Dodo. The judge administering the trust provided her mother with $4,000 monthly for the child's care, equivalent to over $70,000 today. Gloria's paternal aunt, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, watched with growing concern. A sculptor and founder of the Whitney Museum, Gertrude controlled $78 million and represented old Vanderbilt respectability. When Gloria came to New York in 1932 for a tonsillectomy, Gertrude invited her to recuperate at her Long Island estate. The summer visits stretched into years. Gertrude refused to return the child, and Gloria's mother's allowance was stopped since her daughter was no longer in her care. On October 1st, 1934, the battle erupted in Manhattan Surrogate Court. For 7 brutal weeks, Depression-era Americans, struggling to feed their own families, became transfixed with tales of European villas, titled lovers, and a $4,000 monthly allowance for 1 child's care. Newspapers ran special editions. Radio broadcasters interrupted programs with updates. The trial became known as the Trial of the Century, competing with the Lindbergh kidnapping for headline space. Nanny testified that Gloria's mother spent no time with her daughter. French maid Martha Callot delivered explosive testimony about witnessing Gloria Morgan Vanderbilt with Lady Milford Haven kissing her just like a lover. The press christened 10-year-old Gloria the poor little rich girl. On the witness stand, the terrified child said she wanted to stay with Aunt Gertrude. Only decades later would Gloria reveal that Gertrude's lawyer had coached her on exactly what to say. Life with Aunt Gertrude proved a different kind of prison. Gloria lived in opulent surroundings but under constant surveillance, forbidden from normal childhood friendships, treated more like a valuable artwork than a child. She attended a succession of elite schools but found no warmth, no affection, only the cold satisfaction of Gertrude having won her prize. The damage ran deep, creating a young woman desperate for love, validation, and above all, escape from anyone who might control her. At 17, Gloria fled to Hollywood, where she would marry a man with connections darker than any past Vanderbilt scandal. On December 28, 1941, 17-year-old Gloria Vanderbilt walked down the aisle at Santa Barbara Mission wearing a Howard Greer gown with a train stretching more than 30 feet. Actor Bruce Cabot stood as best man. Actress Carol Marcus served as bridesmaid. The bride wore Vanderbilt family pearls, and the wedding cake topper sported a miniature replica of her dress. The groom was Pascal Pat DiCicco, 32 years old and twice Gloria's age. Publicly, he worked as a Hollywood agent, movie producer, and Howard Hughes's press secretary. Privately, he was widely believed to be Lucky Luciano's right-hand man in Hollywood, establishing narcotics, gambling, and prostitution operations in the film industry. But it would seem Gloria had no idea who she was marrying. "I just thought he was terrific. I was crazy about him and would have married him in a minute," she later admitted. And DiCicco's past should have served as a warning. In 1932, he had married rising Hollywood star Thelma Todd. Their marriage was particularly unstable and frequently erupted in drunken brawls, one of which resulted in a broken nose for DiCicco and an emergency appendectomy for Todd. They divorced in 1934 on grounds of cruelty and incompatibility. On December 16, 1935, Thelma Todd was found dead in her car from carbon monoxide poisoning. Officers ruled it self-inflicted, but many suspected murder. Rumors swirled that mobsters connected to DiCicco, including Lucky Luciano himself, had killed her when she refused to let him use her sidewalk cafe as an illegal gambling front. DiCicco had been at the Trocadero nightclub with actress Margaret Lindsay the night before Todd's death, where he'd had a brief confrontation with his ex-wife. 2 years later, DiCicco was implicated in the death of comedian Ted Healy of Three Stooges fame. Healy allegedly died from injuries sustained in a bar fight with actor Wallace Beery, DiCicco, and cousin Albert Cubby Broccoli, who later produced the James Bond films. The marriage to Gloria quickly turned violent, they say. DiCicco proved to be a temperamental and abusive husband who nicknamed her Fatsy Rue and regularly beat her. "He would take my head and bang it against the wall," Gloria later revealed. "I had black eyes." In 1942, DiCicco got into a vicious argument with Columbia student boss Harry Cohn at the fashionable nightclub 21, chasing him into the street while shocked patrons watched. He brutally beat Gloria while muttering the name Thelma over and over. On January 26, 1945, Gloria announced their separation. In April 1945, she won a divorce in Reno, Nevada, citing extreme cruelty. She was 21 years old, finally freed from both an abusive marriage and her aunt's legal control, with access to her $4.3 million trust fund. Just one day after the divorce was finalized, Gloria would marry again. And this time, her choice would shock society even more than her union with a suspected mobster. In April 1945, one day after her divorce from Pat DiCicco was finalized, Gloria Vanderbilt married Leopold Stokowski in Mexico. She was 21 years old. He was 63, a full 42 years her senior. But Leopold Anthony Stokowski was no ordinary senior citizen. Born in London in 1882, he had become the first conductor to achieve true superstar status, regarded as something of a matinee idol. His 25-year tenure with the Philadelphia Orchestra from 1912 to 1937 had transformed it into one of the world's finest ensembles. Stokowski conducted without a baton, using only his hands in a distinctive style that mesmerized audiences. Women swooned over the charismatic maestro at the Hollywood Bowl and in concert halls worldwide. Most Americans knew him from Walt Disney's groundbreaking 1940 animated film, Fantasia. He had appeared as himself, conducting the Philadelphia Orchestra and even engaging in an on-screen conversation with Mickey Mouse. He'd also starred in the 1937 film 100 Men and a Girl. "I knew him for a week and married 3 weeks later," Gloria told her son Anderson decades afterward. The whirlwind courtship suggested that Gloria was working on pure emotion and a fresh start. This was Stokowski's third marriage. He had previously wed concert pianist Olga Samara from 1911 to 1923, with whom he had a daughter, Sonia. Then came Johnson & Johnson Evangeline Brewster Johnson from 1926 to 1937, producing 2 more daughters. Gloria became stepmother to 3 women close to or older than her own age, yet the marriage made a certain cultural sense that her union with DeCicco never had. For Gloria, Stokowski represented everything that DeCicco wasn't. While DeCicco had shown no interest in her artistic talents, Stokowski actively encouraged her painting and design work. She was attending the Art Students League, developing her skills as a visual artist, and Stokowski embodied the cultured, artistic world she aspired to inhabit. And the Vanderbilt name still carried cachet in artistic circles. For Stokowski, whose previous wife had been a Johnson & Johnson heiress, marrying a Vanderbilt aligned with his elevated social position. The marriage of a famous conductor and a Vanderbilt heiress resonated in ways that Hollywood agent and mob-connected socialite never could. April 1945 marked the final month of World War II in Europe. Social conventions were in flux, and unconventional marriages that would have been scandalous a decade earlier gained acceptance. Age gap marriages, while unusual, weren't unheard of when the man was accomplished, distinguished, and well-known. The marriage would last 10 years and produce 2 sons who would carry their father's surname rather than Vanderbilt. This seemingly simple fact would have profound implications for their lives, separating them from the social expectations, media scrutiny, and historical baggage that came with their mother's name. Leopold Stanislaus Stokowski arrived on August 22, 1950, 5 years into his parents' marriage. His brother Christopher followed on January 31, 1952. Both boys entered a household unlike any other on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Their father was 68 when Stan was born, 70 when Christopher arrived. Leopold still conducted major orchestras, still commanded standing ovations, but he was older than most grandfathers at the playground. Their mother, Gloria, was 26 and 28 respectively, young enough to be mistaken for an older sister, beautiful enough to stop photographers on the street. The boys carried their father's surname, not their mother's famous one. On birth certificates, school enrollments, doctor's forms, they were Stokowskis. Therefore, the Vanderbilt lineage remained present but unspoken, like an heirloom tucked away in a drawer. They had 3 much older half-sisters from their father's previous marriages. Sonia Stokowski, born in 1921 to Leopold's first wife, was old enough to be their mother. 2 more daughters from his marriage to Johnson & Johnson heiress Evangeline Brewster Johnson completed the complex family constellation. These women had grown up in different decades, different worlds, connected to the boys only through their aging father. The marriage that produced Stan and Christopher was already showing cracks. Leopold encouraged Gloria's artistic pursuits, but he kept her socially isolated. He wanted a wife who would orbit around him, not one who might outshine him. Gloria, who had married to escape control, found herself trapped again. By 1954, when Stan was 4 and Christopher barely 2, Gloria had begun an affair with Frank Sinatra. She was 30 years old, desperate for excitement, for recognition as more than just the Maestro's young wife. The affair was brief but significant. It marked Gloria's refusal to disappear into another man's shadow. The divorce came a year later in 1955. Gloria fought Leopold for custody of the boys and won, but she made a crucial decision that shaped their childhoods. She refused to allow the children to testify, sparing them the ordeal that she had endured at age 10 when Gertrude Whitney's lawyer coached her on what to say about her own mother. Stan was 5, Christopher only 3 when their parents split. They would grow up shuffling between households, between their mother's increasing fame and their father's fading glory. Their early years included time in London schools before returning to the United States, where they would navigate the peculiar challenge of being Vanderbilt heirs who didn't carry the name. In 1963, Gloria married her 4th and final husband, Wyatt Cooper. Stan was 13, Christopher 11. They would gain 2 more half-brothers, Carter Vanderbilt Cooper in 1965 and Anderson Hayes Cooper in 1967. 4 boys, 2 surnames, and 1 mother who had spent her life trying to escape the damage of her childhood. It is at this point in our story we'll traverse two very different paths. One son who would build a quiet life in the shadows, another who would disappear entirely for nearly 4 decades. Gloria Vanderbilt raised 4 boys across 2 marriages, and the contrast between the pairs revealed everything about how surnames, timing, and circumstance can shape one's destiny. Stan and Christopher Stokowski grew up as the sons of a fading classical music legend and a socialite still finding her way. By the time Anderson and Carter Cooper arrived in the mid-1960s, their mother had transformed into Gloria Vanderbilt, the designer, the artist, the brand. The older boys knew struggle, the younger ones knew only success. Leopold still lived until 1977, reaching the remarkable age of 95, but his glory days conducting the Philadelphia Orchestra were long past. The boys visited an old man who spoke of Fantasia while the world moved on to the Beatles. Anderson and Carter, by contrast, grew up in a stable household with Wyatt Cooper, a Mississippi-born writer who provided the steady father figure Gloria's older sons had lacked. While Stan and Christopher navigated the complex dynamics of elderly father and young mother, the Cooper boys had parents who functioned as a team. The surname difference mattered more than anyone anticipated. In the 1950s and early 1960s, being a Stokowski meant connections to high culture, but not necessarily high society. Being a Cooper in the 1970s, with Gloria Vanderbilt jeans selling 150,000 pairs on their very first day, meant something entirely different. Stan adapted by becoming invisible. He built friendships quietly, attended school without fanfare, and discovered he preferred landscaping to spotlights. When he reached adulthood, he chose the Hamptons over Manhattan, working with his hands rather than trading in on his heritage. But Christopher took a different path. He inherited his father's musical talents, but not his temperament for public performance. He attended Bard College, known for its art programs, and began working in classical music under an alias. The weight of being Leopold's son in that world was already heavy. Adding Vanderbilt would have become unbearable. Gloria tried to maintain connections. With Stan and Christopher, she carried the guilt of their disrupted childhood, the custody battle, the elderly father who couldn't play catch in Central Park. With Anderson and Carter, she could be the mother she always wanted to be. In 1978, 2 events shattered whatever equilibrium the family had achieved. Wyatt Cooper died suddenly during heart surgery, leaving 10-year-old Anderson and 13-year-old Carter fatherless. The same year, Christopher, then 26, abruptly severed all contact with the family after Gloria's therapist allegedly interfered in his engagement to April Sandmeyer. Stan remained, building his landscaping business, maintaining his relationship with Gloria, watching his younger half-brothers cope with tragedy. But Christopher vanished completely, beginning an estrangement that would last 38 years. The 4 sons of Gloria Vanderbilt, 2 Stokowskis, 2 Coopers, illustrated how the same mother could produce entirely different destinies, but only 3 of them would gather at her funeral in 2019. In 1976, Gloria Vanderbilt did something that no other Vanderbilt had done in generations. She worked for a living. At 52, she partnered with manufacturer Mohan Murjani to launch designer jeans with her signature embroidered on the back pocket and a swan logo on the front. The first commercial aired during a soap opera. Within hours, 150,000 pairs sold out completely. Department stores couldn't stock them fast enough. By 1980, the brand was generating $200 million in annual sales. Gloria had created the first designer denim line, marketed directly to consumers through aggressive advertising. The jeans expanded into blouses, dresses, accessories, fragrances, and home goods. At its peak, the Gloria Vanderbilt brand was reportedly worth $100 million. "I'm not knocking inherited money," she said in 1985, "but the money I've made has a reality to me that inherited money doesn't have." Anderson would later echo this sentiment, calling inherited wealth an initiative sucker and a curse. The empire wouldn't last forever. By the late 1980s, competition from other designer labels eroded her fashion income. Gloria sued her former business partners and lawyer for fraud, winning a $1.7 million judgment she never collected. She was forced to sell her homes to pay back taxes that her lawyer had failed to pay to the IRS. Through it all, her relationships with her 4 sons evolved differently. Stan maintained steady contact, building his landscape business while staying close to his mother. He occasionally appeared at her exhibitions and premieres, comfortable in the background. Christopher remained completely estranged after 1978. Gloria told The Telegraph in 2004, "When Carter died, I thought he would come back, but he didn't. And we respect his wishes." She refused to reveal his whereabouts, but clearly never stopped thinking about him. Carter's taking of his own life on July 22, 1988, devastated the family. She wrote about it in her 1997 book, A Mother's Story, trying to make sense of the senseless. Anderson famously threw himself into journalism, building a career that would eventually surpass even his mother's fame. He became CNN's star anchor, earning $11 million annually, carefully avoiding mentions of his Vanderbilt heritage until later in life. The 2016 HBO documentary Nothing Left Unsaid, Gloria Vanderbilt and Anderson Cooper changed everything. Though it barely mentioned Christopher out of respect for his privacy, it sparked renewed interest in the missing son. Christopher reached out, finally, through April Sandmeyer, his former fiancée, and reunited with the family after 38 years. Gloria saw Christopher 3 times before her death. Stan appeared in the documentary, speaking with Anderson about their mother and their complicated family history. For a brief moment, all 4 sons were connected again, if not together. When Gloria died on June 17, 2019, at age 95 from stomach cancer, she left behind an estate valued at approximately $1.5 million, far less than the $200 million many expected. Her will would reveal one last surprise about how she valued each son's place in her life. When Gloria Vanderbilt's will was filed in Manhattan Surrogate's Court in 2019, the numbers stunned even jaded estate lawyers. The woman, widely reported to be worth $200 million, left an estate valued at approximately $1.5 million. The distribution revealed Gloria's final statement on her 4 sons' places in her life. Leopold Stan Stokowski received her co-op apartment at 30 Beekman Place in Manhattan, valued at approximately $1.2 million. Anderson Cooper received all the rest of the estate, estimated at less than $1.5 million. Christopher Stokowski received nothing. He wasn't even mentioned in the will. The co-op Stan inherited came with monthly maintenance fees of $4,311. Anderson later sold both it and Gloria's ground floor studio apartment to producer Amy Pascal for a combined $3.5 million, $2.5 million for the main residence, and $950,000 for the studio, more than double the original asking prices. Today, Stan Stokowski continues operating New Ground Gardens LLC from Sag Harbor, New York. At 74, he remains married to Emily Goldstein and maintains his status as a certified advanced organic land care professional. His estimated net worth of between $1 to $5 million comes from decades of landscaping, but not inheritance. His daughter Aurora has carved out her own path, co-founding Fair Folks and a Goat, a retail gallery and tea salon on Manhattan's Upper East Side. Now, the Stokowski line continues, professionally, quietly, without fanfare. Christopher Stokowski, now 72, reportedly lives off his late father Leopold's estate, which still generates income from music royalties. Various sources estimate his net worth at approximately $1 million from his music career, performed under an alias. His exclusion from Gloria's will wasn't explained in the legal documents, though sources suggested it reflected both the decades of estrangement and his expressed desire to remain separate from the family's public life. Anderson Cooper has built an empire that would impress even the Commodore. His net worth exceeds $100 million, earned through his $11 million annual CNN salary and careful investments. In 2020, he welcomed son Wyatt Morgan Cooper via surrogate, named after the father he lost at age 10. A second son, Sebastian Luke Maisani Cooper, followed in 2022. Anderson has been explicit about inheritance. He doesn't believe in passing wealth onto children without them earning it themselves. The Vanderbilt fortunes collapse across 5 generations, from $200 billion to $1.5 million, taught him that unearned wealth corrodes ambition. The Stokowski brothers represent a fascinating footnote in the Vanderbilt saga. They are legitimate heirs who chose different paths. Stan building quietly in the shadows, Christopher vanishing into them. Their surnames spared them the burden of public expectation, while their bloodline connected them to American history. 4 sons, 2 surnames, 1 mother who spent her life escaping the trauma of being the poor little rich girl. In the end, Gloria's greatest inheritance that she passed on wasn't money, but the lesson she gave each of her sons. Build your own life, because even the greatest fortune could get lost in one generation. And now, I'd love to see you in the comments. Were you aware of these secret Vanderbilts, the Stokowskis? And what is your opinion of their story? I appreciate your time here at Old Money Empires. And again, be sure to check the first link in the video description if you're interested in getting free access to much more information from us. With that said, thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.